towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah, who is mercy and compassion. Okay, welcome, friends, and thank you for your interest and curiosity about the spiritual direction training program that is scheduled to begin January 2023, offered through Sarati Inayat Interfaith Sufi Path. That is the organization that is responsible for this training program. There are three teachers that are holding the leadership of the program together. I'm Sarah. Saraswati is my whole big long name, but I go by Sarah. And I also have two beautiful co-teachers. Wadud Henry Cretella is a psychiatrist in New York State, and Halim Simon Shadowlight is sorry, my brain stopped, a science of mind practitioner and minister, and also one of the mu'allims, one of the teachers and leaders in Sarati Inayat. So the three of us will be holding joint responsibility for the program. Each of us bring a different field of expertise, background, perspectives, and also very different personalities, which kind of rounds things out. And so you can see different ways of being and holding these concentrations, these ideas, these foundational knowledge and practice. So let's see, in response to your questions, the classes, the meeting times will be on the second and fourth Thursdays of each month, starting in January of 2023. We are meeting for an hour and a half each of those Zoom sessions, which is kind of a compromise. 1 hour is not quite long enough. 2 hours is too long and our eyes are crossing. So an hour and a half. For the first of those sessions of the month, that is on the second Thursday of the month, it'll be a lot of information, instruction, download of guidance, education about various topics, and also some practice. Some, like, we'll do some of breaking into groups to practice different skills, some fishbowl sessions, which means that most people on the Zoom will be watching while two people do some kind of an exercise together, that sort of thing. We can do breakout rooms if that is necessary for some practices. The second of the sessions each month, that'll be on the fourth Thursdays of the month, will be more group practice time, not so much information download, but more engagement with the practices, developing the skills. And once we start our practicums, those will be supervision sessions. So supervision sessions will include each of the participants bringing experience from their actual sessions of spiritual direction practicum, and the whole group holding those things and offering support, perspective, wisdom, guidance, adjustments about how those practices are going. We are starting those sessions at 9 a.m. Mountain Time, which is 8 a.m. Pacific, because Wadud is East Coast, that's 11 a.m. And we deliberately chose this time so that it would be accessible for people in Europe that might want to join us. So depending on time zones, for example, in Germany, that will be starting at 7, is that true? 5 p.m. in Germany and going until 6:30 p.m. in Germany. For the most part, there might be a little bit of overlap and it gets a little wonky when time zones change for daylight saving, et cetera. But that's why it's at that time, 9 a.m. Mountain Time, Mountain Standard, I should say. Okay, for each of these participants, you will be assigned a mentor that will be either myself, Wadud, or Halim. And Wadud and Halim and I have talked about how we should assign those mentorship relationships. And there are several possibilities. What we've decided on, at least as a preliminary decision, is that there will be a random assignment that we will place lovingly each participant's name into a hat, and we will draw them out so that there is a random assignment of mentors. We've also discussed whether we would want to change mentors partway through so that each of us mentors could know each of the participants. And that's a possibility, but our immediate thought is that we won't do that, that it would be a nice consistent flow for each participant to be able to stay with the same mentor through the 2-year program. I don't know that those things are solid, but that's what we've discussed as a 3-person teacher leadership team, and we'll see. I'm inclined to say right now, while I'm hearing some of you and your desires for one arrangement or another, I will bring your input to the other teachers and see if we need to renegotiate that decision, but that's the decision right now. Okay, will there be books, etc., that need to be purchased? Our general idea is to keep this very not academically oriented, that we know that some people really love reading about things and diving into lots of information. We will make some book suggestions and things that you can read if you're interested in that. In my experience of leading trainings for a bunch of adults, it's a very mixed bag of people that really want the information and people who feel really stressed out and overwhelmed by reading assignments. So we'll make some suggestions and recommendations, but we're not planning to do things that cost money or that are required fees. So we don't want this to be any more financially stressful than necessary. Along with that, about money, I think that we have been very clear in saying, here's the overall financial commitment. The program fee, if you pay it upfront, it's $2,000 for the entire 2-year training, which is basically $1,000 per year. And we've said, if you do that upfront, if you just pay one lump sum, that's what it is. If you pay a yearly sum of $1,000 per year, that's what it is. If you break it out smaller than that, it's $100 per month, which ends up being $2,400. It's an additional $400, or you could think about it the other way. The base idea is $100 per month, that's $2,400. If you do big lump sums of the whole thing or one per month, you get a $400 discount. Congratulations. So there's that. The last thing of the retreat will be a graduation, kind of a culminating retreat, of the program that will be at the very end. December of 2024 will be the final meeting. That is the first weekend of December that will be a retreat. I anticipate the retreat will cost somewhere between $300 and $400. That will be for lodging and food for the retreat. Most of you have been at lots of retreats with me. You know how I do these things. For those of you who are new to that, we try to base retreats exactly on cost. And then if you are able and want to contribute more on top of that, you're welcome to, because we do put a lot of time and energy into preparing and presenting retreats. And then whatever your travel expenses are to get here, that retreat will be in Colorado. And so if it costs you an extra $300 of airfare and considerations to get here, you get to budget that in, but I'm not trying to calculate that for you. There's also a required monthly spiritual direction session. Everyone who participates in this program is required to be in spiritual direction with an acceptable spiritual director. So we are not being super rigid about that. You don't have to have someone who has a certification or a degree in spiritual direction, but it does need to be a formal, agreed upon, experienced spiritual director. For some people, that can be their Sufi teacher. Most of you are probably going to have a relationship with a Sufi teacher. That's not required either, but that would be acceptable if your relationship with your Sufi teacher actually functions in a way that is in alignment with the tenets of spiritual direction. Not all Sufi teachers would fit that category. A lot of Sufi teachers are very hands-off or very informal. And so we'll ask for you to check with us about that. If you are hiring, making an agreement with a formal professional spiritual director, you can anticipate paying approximately $100 per hour for spiritual direction sessions. So you are welcome to do that if you want to go and find someone who formally says, I am a spiritual director and this is what I charge. I actually recommend that, but it's not required. Okay. Let's see. I hope that answers your questions about money. If not, I hope you took notes so we can come back to your questions. Your total anticipated time commitment. There is the monthly class that is, well, really the 2 different sessions that we're estimating 90 minutes per session. So you can count on at least 3 hours of on the Zoom time with us. Then there is your monthly group practice session that is, I'm sorry, I said that in a confusing way. So one of those is the class that we do. That's the first session per month. One of those is a group practice thing that is with us also. So then you have a total of between 3 and 4 hours that you're on a Zoom with us each month between those 2 meetings. You also have your monthly spiritual direction session with the person that you chose, that you can expect that to be an hour. So add that in. Now you're up to about 5 hours per month. Then you have practicum hours. In the first couple of months of the training, we will be giving instruction and asking all participants to start doing spiritual direction practicums. And we are going to request that you do that with 3 different people on a monthly basis. So that'll be 3 hours per month of just doing, of you offering spiritual direction for other people as good practice. So I think that's up to 8 hours per month, approximately 8 hours per month. Ta-da! And that's not including the final retreat that will be 24 hours a day for several days. A few days. It'll be like a 4-day retreat, I think. Okay, so you can count on 8 hours per month of dedicated time to this program. You can also say, we do expect and will require everyone to agree and commit to doing daily spiritual practice. That can be on the very wimpy end, 5 minutes per day, but it could be an hour a day. But we'll ask each person to decide and describe to us what it is that you are committed to doing every single day for the next 2 years. It can be something you're already doing. That doesn't have to be something new. You'll also be expected to send in a written or verbal report each month to your assigned mentor. That can be write out a couple paragraphs describing what your experience has been this month, what you've learned, what you've experienced, how it's going for you. For some people who are really uncomfortable writing or that feels stressful, you could get on a phone call or a Zoom call with your mentor and describe what you're doing. So, but there's a monthly check-in with your mentor that is expected. There will also be a final, this is at near the end of the program, what we're calling a capstone project that is some way of conveying and demonstrating the knowledge and your experience in this field of practice. And there will be lots of different ways that you can do that. It's not like writing a thesis. Well, if you want it to be like writing a thesis, you can, but who would want to do that just on purpose? So it can be all kinds of different forms of expressing and demonstrating to us that you have integrated and developed your knowledge and experience and comfort in this field. Okay, I think that covers that. But again, take notes if any of that is unclear. Will this be too much to take on along with, if you're already doing a Shirag training program? I cannot answer that for you. I can describe to you what I just did about the time commitment, the financial commitment, what's really expected. And I guess based on your own life circumstances, I could see it being very reasonable to do both of them at the same time. And in my world, if it were me looking at that question, I would go, yeah, I could do both of those things. For the one person who actually asked that question, I think it would be reasonable for you if you wanted to organize and prioritize that time and energy in your life in that way. That doesn't look like a conflict to me. And I don't know the realities of each of your life, energy, how you organize your time and resources. So for each of you, that answer will be different. Okay, how does this work? Okay, let me come back to this last one. Okay, the overview of topics. And I did describe a tiny bit about the teachers and what what we bring to the table. And I can say a little bit more about that, I suppose. My background, hi, I'm Sarah. My background is in formal spiritual direction, that I went through first a certification training program, and then I actually did a master's degree in spiritual direction. And in both of those trainings, it was an interfaith, interreligious, all inclusive, whatever forms of spirituality our clients bring to us is how we work and how we hold a space for our clients. So that's my formal background and my training. And in my experience and understanding, spiritual direction is functionally almost exactly the same as being a Sufi teacher. It is not the same in that it does not represent a particular lineage stream, and it does not quite carry any particular commitment in an ongoing way. There is no spiritual contract that is made. There is no promise that is made. Spiritual direction happens in an ongoing assessment way. It is expected and it is typical. The nature of a spiritual direction relationship is that it is very long term, that it can go for a number of months, a number of years, decades, a lifetime, and that depends on the needs and texture of the spiritual life of the directee and the availability and expertise of the spiritual director. But it's personally decided. You can think about that agreement, about the length of that relationship being more comparable to a coach or a therapist, that a therapist relationship can go for as long as the relationship is useful and that there is still fruits being developed and cultivated in that relationship. And if at some point that is complete, that relationship can end, and or that the agreement of the sessions can end. In my experience, I've had some spiritual direction clients that stay with me for decades now. I'm old enough that that is decades now. And there are some that happen for 6 months at a time, and then it dissipates for a while, and then someone comes back and does another many months or a couple of years, and then it goes away for a while, and then and that can happen in a natural flow depending on what is called for and in the directee's life, really. Excuse me. So my background, spiritual direction and Sufi teachering and some other things. Halim's background, and the reason that I asked him to be a part of this is because he has training as a minister in science of mind, religious science, and also as a practitioner, which is a whole lot like spiritual direction, that it might be exactly the same thing. I don't know enough about that in detail to know, but the quality and the attention, the intention of those meetings with a practitioner in science of mind sounds to me exactly the same as spiritual direction. And he also has a strong commitment and responsibilities in Surati Inayat. So it felt to me like a nice balance to bring his expertise that's similar but different to mine, and also balances out some of the teacher energy in the Surati Inayat leadership community. I invited Wadud, Henry, to be part of this because of his expertise, both as a psychiatrist. He's now a retired psychiatrist, so I should say that. He's not available to prescribe anything you need now, but he also has decades of experience as a Sufi teacher and also a very interfaith background and interest field. So there's a whole lot of mental health and mental unhealth considerations that are woven into spiritual direction that are really important for us to have a solid understanding of, because spiritual directions do not treat mental illness. Spiritual directors do not treat mental illness. Did you hear that? Spiritual directors do not treat mental illness. And so we, spiritual directors, need to know how to identify mental illness so we can refer clients somewhere else where they can get the treatment they need. That's why we need to understand those areas and those characteristics, the expressions, the activities, the signs and indicators of mental health considerations, so we can refer that to other people. I hope that was very clear. So having a very experienced, wise, integrated mental health professional with a lot of information, a lot of education, a lot of insight about what to look for, what to recognize, and being able to draw really good, clear boundaries and communications about what a spiritual director does and when someone needs to seek mental health, which can happen along with spiritual direction. That it is common for people to be in spiritual direction and also to have mental health support in some way. So that can happen, but it is absolutely essential that a spiritual director be very clear about his, her, their responsibilities and expertise so that we do not overstep, overcommit, and cause damage. Okay, so that's why Henry Wadud is in there and Halim Simon is in there and me in there. Okay, overview of the program includes, here's a crash course. Please don't take this as a comprehensive thing, but I'll tell you that we have broken this out into 24 general topics that include a lot of different things. An introduction and general education overview about what spiritual direction is, the history and background, the foundation in Ignatian spiritual practices. You don't have to know what that is right now. The comparisons between spiritual direction, pastoral counseling, Sufi guidance, psychotherapy, psychiatry, being able to draw a Venn diagram of like, here's this, and here's how it's same and different from these different modalities. Different expressions and forms and ways that people do spiritual direction, mentoring, companioning, soul friending. It's called all these things. Let's see, a lot of things about listening skills, listening intentions, reflective and active listening, but also what we would call holy listening, that is listening with the ears of spirit and with a very strong intention toward the spirit of guidance. A lot of things about key skills in spiritual direction that includes discernment. We're going to talk so much about discernment. You're going to be sick of it. Ad nauseum discernment. That is really looking and feeling and trying to pierce through and beyond the story into the essential truth of a matter. Establishing trust and holding and maintaining your trustworthiness as a spiritual director. Forms of prayer and how to pray, and recognizing and supporting people in all of their different forms and expressions of prayer. Lots of things about ongoing self-awareness and growth. Things about, you'll get sick of this too, conflicting commitments or contradictory commitments. I talk about those things all the time. I love it so much. Things about religious knowledge and background of different spiritual faith traditions. It is not comparative religious studies, but we will do a little wander into a lot of different faith traditions to see how spiritual direction looks or can address things in those areas of spiritual practice and devotion. Themes about meditation techniques, consolation and desolation that are very huge themes in Ignatian spirituality, aspects of dark nights of the soul and how we can identify and work with those things, spiritual bypassing or not spiritual bypassing. Did I say not spiritual bypassing? Not spiritual bypassing, not. Religious knowledge and exercises in all of these different faith traditions, supervision of spiritual direction that is some group process, but also working with mentors. Themes about sexuality and intimacy in one's spiritual life and also within the relationship. This is outside of the relationship of the spiritual director and the directee. Let's see, I don't know if I was clear enough about that. No humping your spiritual direction clients. Don't do it. Let's see, theological models, looking at different perspectives and philosophies about deities, monotheism, pantheism, panentheism. You're unmuted, Inanna. You're muted again. Don't push the button again, please. Divination and channeling, that is in certain areas. Atheism and agnosticism in the realm of spiritual direction, which can happen and does happen a lot. focusing and parts work. Let's see, different spiritual approaches that are very obvious in yogic philosophy, but in other areas as well. Spiritual emergence and spiritual emergency that can be confusing for people in the spiritual path, and along with considerations about mental health. Themes of absolution and forgiveness. I'm probably telling you more than you need to know. Lots of things about understanding yourself that can help you understand and be spacious about others. Mental health norms and development, that is like stages of development. Themes of death, dying, grief, bereavement, stages of grief. Group spiritual direction, which is a very different modality, but very related. Some things about conflict resolution and mediation, communication skills and systems, understanding and working with projection, transference, and countertransference, crises of faith. And then we will have themes of ethics and supervision ongoingly, boundaries, self-care, some things that are very pragmatic and real worldly about how you can put yourself out there and develop your practice as a spiritual director, if that's what you wish to do, how to handle money and marketing, those like just tangible, pragmatic things. And I think that's a pretty good overview. That gives you an idea about some of the things that are included in here. Let's see, where else are we? 40 hours of spiritual direction practicum. So we chose a number of hours that each person who is actually, like, if you are to be certified by the end of this, you need to have offered at least X number of hours of spiritual direction to others. That is your actual experience and development as a spiritual director. That is, just to be very clear, that is along with spending 1 hour per month over the course of this program in spiritual direction yourself. So that can be very easily calculated as you need to have 24 hours of you receiving spiritual direction in an appropriate context, and also providing 40 hours, I think we said 40 hours of spiritual direction as practicum to others. Okay, so the question about, well, will this be available to do this program or training later? I really don't know. So if you are going like, well, I really want to do it, but maybe I want to do it later, it really might not be available later. And the litmus about that, the question, the determining factor about that right now is really the number of participants that are interested in it. That what Halim and Wadud and I have said is that we need to have an absolute minimum of 12 full-time, absolutely committed. Inanna, you're unmuted again. Please stop doing that.
Sorry, I'm having problems.
I see that. I can mute you. Don't swipe your screen again. Whatever you're doing with your screen is unmuting. Okay. So if we have at least 12 committed, full on board, absolute, we can count on these 12 people doing it. We will do the program starting January. That is in a little over a month that will begin. If we do not have at least 12 people, we are not doing this program even. And right now, I don't know yet if that is going to happen, because I haven't had my interviews with the people who have applied. That I just yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I went through, and the people who have like formally submitted their written applications, I sent those people the instructions about setting up their interview with me to see whether this is a good fit for them to be part of this program. And I will not say yes to people in order to reach numbers. That if, and I honestly have already told one person that that person is not going to do this program. So I am very capable of saying no to people. If we have 12 people that get through that interview process and want to do this, then we'll do it. Right now, that is possible, but it's not a given based on the number of applications that I currently have in hand. and the people who have told me that they want to do it. And, I figure probably some of you that are on this Zoom are considering whether to send your application in the next 48 hours. You have 48 hours, friends. So, so it really might be, it's now or never. For those of you who are like, well, maybe I'll do it next time around. There really might not be a next time around. Okay. Back to this big question that is somewhat related, but also goes into other territory about how does this order work? Shirags, guides, sheikhs, spiritual directors. These are all different qualities, functions, responsibilities. Like I said at the very beginning, Sarati Inayat Interfaith Sufi Path is the formal organization that is offering this particular spiritual direction training program that is an interfaith spiritual direction training program. There are also other things that happen within Sarati Inayat. Shirags, there are programs that are currently happening that are training shirags, and a shirag is an ordained minister, which is a very different function from spiritual direction. A minister provides a spiritual resource and support to a community that can be to groups of people or to individuals, and groups or individuals. Shirags can officiate the universal worship service, officiate weddings, funerals, provide pastoral counseling as needed, and can create rites of passage, rituals, blessings, offer prayers in whatever ways are called for in their communities. A shirag is not a spiritual director necessarily, though that can get a little confusing because originally spiritual directors functioned within the context of a church. And so it was the clergy of the church that also provided spiritual direction. I put that in the past tense, but that is ongoingly, and the field of spiritual direction has expanded into more secular areas. So an ordained minister is not necessarily a spiritual director, and a spiritual director is definitely not an ordained minister. That they can be both, like I am both a minister and a spiritual director, but someone who is trained in spiritual direction may or may not be able, capable, willing, trained, or endorsed by a church organization to officiate a funeral. That might be a completely different skill set and preparation. Okay, in Sufi lineage streams, there are also, I'll use the word guide, which is a little bit confusing also, but a Sufi guide is an initiator that offers a particular blessing and invites someone, an initiate, a murid, a student, into a particular lineage stream of teachings, practices of the generations upon generations of teachers that are holding a responsibility and a field of blessing in a particular Sufi school. So in Sarati Inayat, Interfaith Sufi Path, we call initiators and guides sheikhs. That's the name, the word, the formal title that we use for someone who is empowered to offer initiations and to function as a personal guide to others within our lineage stream. Different orders use different words and have different systems of initiations. So that's the way that Sarati Inayat is functioning with, and we have a very simple hierarchy of those initiations and responsibilities. I don't know if that was part of your question. Probably is. So there is, in Sarati Inayat, there is the big boss person that is currently the Piro Murshida, that is me. And so I am the primary lineage holder and the ultimate decision maker that is done within this context of a bunch of different leaders and teachers and wisdom council. And so we have a bunch of different things in place for that. Then there are the sheikhs that are the initiated teachers that can provide guidance and offer this blessing and welcome people into the lineage stream of Sarati Inayat. And there are a handful of those sheikhs that are those initiated teachers in Sarati Inayat. And then there are the initiated murids, which is everyone else that has received initiation and is officially a murid in Surati Anayat. Now, those things are happening in that particular order, and spiritual direction is not directly related to any of that. So you do not have to be a sheikh or an initiated murid in Surati Anayat to be a spiritual director. So that's a different function that happens within that supervision organization, but is not related to the lineage stream in a formal way. I hope that's clear. Okay. I think that answered the questions to the best of my notes, and I will pause the recording and hear from you again. Okay, here we are again after gathering some more questions and having some more conversation. So the first thing is, what is the difference between spiritual direction training and Shirag training? And these are two very distinct processes in Surati Anayat. That spiritual direction is a field of practice that happens all over the place now, including in very secular contexts. So being prepared, being trained to be a spiritual director can be a preparation for your own private practice, that you can set up your business, your offering, your service as a spiritual director in the world, in your life, that you can list that as your modality, your profession, your expertise, your work in the world. And that typically looks like, from an outside perspective, if somebody doesn't really know what's happening, it looks like therapy. It looks like somebody schedules ongoing meetings with you on a monthly basis and shows up at your office or in your Zoom room or in your living room and has a conversation with you once a month about their spiritual life, about what's happening in their world, in their relationships, in their heart, in their soul. And you tend to that process as a friend, as a sincere companion, trying to help that person develop and maintain their spiritual practice, their meditation practice, their relationship with their own heart, with their own God or God ideal, or the spirit of guidance, or the wisdom of life itself. You can use any phrase, use the phrase that your client wishes, not your phrase, but that's what that is. It's a relationship as a spiritual companion. A Shirag is a minister so the training for a minister, at least in Surati Anayat, includes a whole bunch of things that focus on the intentions and vision of Piro Murshid Hazrat Inayat Khan as our guiding teacher and the visionary who offered the universal worship service, and also gave instructions about how people can officiate weddings and funerals and offer blessings and prayers for the dying and the dead and the living, blessing babies, cleansing and purifying houses, dwellings. He used the word dwellings. I don't know if he actually used the word house on that, probably not. So all of those things that are functions of clergy, of an ordained minister. So in Surati Anayat, the Shirag training is ideally, and the way that I hold the training programs that I do, it is a 2-year process that goes through attunement to the universal worship service and Murshid's visions and values of spiritual liberty and spiritual ideals, the unity of religious ideals. It includes an exploration of more than, but at least 6 different faith traditions, learning about the different religions that have contributed to the fabric of society and human evolution over the centuries, millennia. And it also includes preparation in how to do the universal worship service or universal worship celebrations if there's an innovation that isn't just the formal service. It includes training and preparation about, so this is about Shirag training. It includes preparation about how to support people through funeral and memorial services and weddings and house blessings. It can include baby blessings, but we don't really focus on that as a particular modality because it's not very common, and not, but the people who want to do that can. So it's a preparation for ministry, for tending to the spiritual needs of a community. And while that particular training is inclusive and interfaith, it is rooted in the vision of Sufism and the Sufi practices and the the pedagogy and wisdom of Inayat Khan's Sufi teachings and lineage. Spiritual direction, on the other hand, while we are functioning within the organizational context of Sarati Inayat, which is a Sufi organization, spiritual direction is really about tending to the spiritual path of the person who comes to you. That it is not teaching people how to be Sufis. It is not teaching people how to do Sufi practices. It is not guiding people in Sufi rituals or belief systems. It's not guiding anyone in anything. It is tending to someone's own guidance in their own way, in their own spiritual life. So spiritual direction is not officiating services. Spiritual direction is not providing any particular spiritual resource to a community. It is not standing in front of a congregation and delivering a sermon. It is not lighting a candles and leading a ceremony for a group of people. It is tending to the spiritual life of the individuals who come for support and guidance. Okay, so Shirag training, completely separate. For some of us, there's an overlap in our work in the world. It is somewhat common for someone who is drawn to the service of spiritual direction to also be drawn to the service of a Shirag, of a minister. And that's fine. And I personally encourage people to, develop all of the skills that you can, and anything that is inspiring you or that is part of your calling, and that you would like to develop the skills and gather the knowledge and experience to be able to do that with great skill and authenticity, sincerity, integrity, humility. Awesome. Do it. Like whatever you're called to do, please do. That the world needs all the service we can provide. Our communities need all the service we can provide. And the individuals who will naturally seek us out and find us, we want to be able to provide what support and resource we can in whatever ways we are called to. So there can't be too many. Murshid in Inayat Khan, when he was training Shirags, and in his, it's a set of papers that he calls Addresses to Shirags, that is his teachings and ways of talking directly to the people who were functioning as ministers or were preparing to function as ministers, that he said that really the universal worship service should be happening in every town, in every village, in every city in the entire world. And for larger towns and cities, it can be happening, there can be 20 or 30 different services happening in every city, in every larger city. And for the people who are drawn to do that service, they are welcome and encouraged to do that. And that if there is not a Shirag, if there is not someone who is trained and ordained in your area, you do it. That when you are called, when you are asked to provide a service, do it. The more light, the better. Spiritual direction is a little bit different in that it tends to be more about the personal direct relationships. That when in a personal way, when I was a teenager, I was 17, 18 years old, and I would get phone calls from strangers saying, I am trying to do this thing in my spiritual life, in my religious expression, and I need help. And will you please guide me? Will you please mentor me? Will you please teach me? That was when I was a teenager. I know that seems to me like those people are foolish for calling a teenager to ask for help, but people are drawn to who they're naturally drawn to. And God guides people to the people that can help them, that can support them, that can help strengthen and resource and inspire and encourage them in their path. And it's mysterious that, and we don't get a say-so in that. This, oh, what? Oh, okay. Thank you, Miriam. Lots of love. I'll send you the recording later. So there's there's a way that each of us has a calling. Each of us has what is ours to do in the world. And we can argue with it. We can pretend not to see it. We can not pay attention to it for long periods of time, for our entire lives, if we want to be really stubborn about it. But really, our calling has been instilled in us from before we were born. And it plays out with greater and greater fullness the more we tend to it, allow it, draw our attention to it, respect it, honor it, work with it, and invite the resources that we need to be able to live it as fully as possible. So if you know that you are called to the work of spiritual direction, you can call it whatever you want to, but spiritual companioning, if people seek you out and ask you, or even if they aren't asking you for something, if you know that you just sit down somewhere and people come and start talking to you about their meditation and prayer without knowing anything about you, then this is your work to do. Or it can be if you know that you in your life, in your spiritual journey, have been supported in ways from an individual who you had great trust and great confidence in, who you really felt safe with, who you respected, and you sought that person out and said, can you please help me with this? I'm really wanting to tend to the life of my soul, and I don't know how to do that. Or I really want someone to hear me and witness me and just encourage me and tell me that I'm doing okay. If you had that experience somewhere in your life and you want to provide that for others because it was so powerful and such a beautiful blessing, and you want to be able to pay that forward, then this is your calling also. On another side of that, if you know that you have spent your spiritual life feeling lonely and isolated and wishing that there was someone that you could talk with that would understand and support and hold you, respect you, encourage you, accept you, and love you and tell you that you're doing everything right in your spiritual life, that your spiritual unfolding is exactly perfect, exactly as it is, and that you want somebody to do that for you and you haven't had that, and it's been a pain and a loneliness and a great loss and longing in your life, then maybe this is your calling because you recognize that longing and want to be able to help people with that, to save people from that same loneliness and pain. All of those things can be an indication that this kind of work is yours to do, whether it's through this training program or any training program or whatever it is, that paying attention to those longings, those experiences, that sense of what is really important and powerful, useful, and where your heart is pulled, then please follow that in whatever ways you can. I can also be very clear in saying it is common for people to be drawn to this kind of work and that they are already entirely prepared, entirely knowledgeable, skillful, and all they need is someone else, some external validation and encouragement to give them the confidence and the willingness to step forward and provide what is theirs to do. And this kind of training might provide that for you. So sometimes it's because you really need to develop the knowledge and skills, because you really need to work hard to come into your own integrity and self-awareness to do a good job with this work. For some of you, that will be true. And for some of you, it will be like, I already got everything I need. I absolutely know that I have everything I need, but I need the integrity or the confirmation or the validation and the empowerment that can come from an external source that I trust. Okay, I'm going to pause myself, the recording again so I can hear from you.